So do you guys have like sequence or like we can just go with the flow? Because I did some like buckets of the questions. So I just found like per ads integration, question on visualization, alerts, and like suggestions on like how to put all the segments together. So I think those are the common buckets.
That's good. And if we want, we can also use that workspace project and just scroll through.
So I'm just going to jump in for a moment just to kick things off.
Perfect.
So if anybody's been to office hours before, you might recognize me. My name is Mandy. So just a reminder for today's office hours, it is being recorded and will be available on the office hours YouTube channel afterwards. It's just the participant screen and voice that's being recorded. The chat on the side is not being recorded. So if you have any questions throughout, feel free to add questions in the chat. And I will kick it over to our analytics champions today to give a brief introduction of themselves and then jump into answering your questions. And I'll be in the background if anybody needs any support. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Nicholas.
Good morning, everyone. Good afternoon, or wherever you are in the world. So, to start with, I'm Benj. Welcome to Adobe Analytics January office hours, and with me are fellow awesome Adobe Analytics champions. So I'll let them introduce themselves. So quickly, like I'm Benj. I'm a digital analyst from Philips, and I'll be your moderator for today. So over to you. I'll to Mitchell.
Hey, thank you. Mitchell Teixeira. I've worked with Adobe Analytics since it was the Omniture days at the very beginning of the acquisition. I'm more on the implementation side. I really enjoy working with digital analytics, and I kind of work from the angle of kind of on a forensic side since I'm on implementation. Always looking to find out really what's going on a site and dig in deeper. And thank you.
Thank you. Want to go next, Kelsey?
Awesome. Hi, everyone. Kelsey Peterson. I lead the Marketing Analytics and Insights team at SAP Concur. I've been using Adobe Analytics for seven plus years. And my team manages the Adobe Analytics administration, our work streams with web tracking, our reporting best practices, our internal enablement program. And I'm really excited to share what I know with you all. Help where I can.
Last but not least, go Frederik.
Indeed. So, hi everyone, I'm Frederik. I'm working with DHL. I'm the practice lead analytics there, so I'm responsible for Adobe Analytics launch and target. And yeah, doing the full stack of analytics there, from implementation to training to like all the other strategic topics. And very excited to be here today to share some Adobe Analytics tips and tricks, answer some questions. Thanks.
Yes, thanks everyone for giving your questions before the session, and I want to share the workspace right away so we can answer.
Yes, on the way already, and right. Let's hope that I'm now sharing Adobe Analytics and not something awfully compromising. All good?
All
Cool.
good.
Then we can just go through. So I've built this little workspace and I've just taken the questions like in the order in which they appeared and tried to cluster a little bit. So should we just go through them? I think that would work for everyone. Cool. So first question then was about advertising analytics and performance max ads campaigns, which is something that I've heard for the first time in the question itself, because I'm not very much of a marketing person. But the question is, with AA advertising analytics, the Google Ads integration, how do you consider your performance max ad type that doesn't flow through? And that, at least to me, sounds like a bug that might be worth raising to client care, because I would expect to see all my Google campaigns inside advertising analytics. unless I'm not horribly off and any of you guys have any different experiences with that feature, but I would expect that to come through, right?
Yeah, I'd echo that.
Cool.
That would be the ideal.
Are there some query string parameters that it kind of advise that or inform the tool that it's a performance max add?
Yeah, that's a very good question. So, like, what it would mean in any case, like, what you would want to debug and take a look at from your like implementation side, just like with every advertising analytics integration, is what you should see whenever you click on a campaign is a query string that holds the AMO, the, what's that again, Adobe Media Optimizer, I think, the Adobe Media Optimizer ID. And if that is present, then there should be a connection made. So on your end as well, you can debug if that query string is present, and if it is, then everything is good from your implementation side, and we can agree that it should be working just fine. But if it isn't, then you might want to check your tracking templates within Google Ads, because that's where you make that connection, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah. Maybe also we're double checking things like the report suites, the date, time frame, segmentation, just kind of common debugging as well, because there could just be something set up within the view that you have that that could be impacting what you're seeing from a data perspective.
Very true.
Mm-hmm.
Cool. So if the person who asked the question is also in chat right now, you can give us some feedback, I think, if that was already answering the question, and then we could move on and scroll further down through this amazingly long project.
In 3, 2, 1.
Perfect.
Okay.
Then we scroll down. So there was a question that was, why are different segments needed to analyze traffic metrics and event metrics of a page? For example, you need pages segment filter to show traffic metrics and page name v40 eva40 in this specific implementation for events like clicks. Is there a simpler solution? And in my first reading of that question, that sounds like that implementation, like much like any implementation I've seen for Adobe Analytics, is using a custom page dimension. So you can either use your built-in page dimension, and that like page dimension, even if you try to set it with any non-page view events, like Adobe Analytics will only accept it for page view events, because it has some historical meaning, like why it's needed for processing. So it really needs to have the page dimension only set on page view, so you can see other metrics, like for example your link clicks. There's just nothing coming through, even if you set it on your implementation side, because that's how it's doing it. But if you are using a custom page dimension, and like this is demo data, so it's not our own, so this is where I'm using this dimension because it has page in it. So what you can do to like work around that is you can just copy over your page name to any dimension you like. So any prop or eval will work. And as long as you set that prop or eval with any event that you're using, so both for page views and also link clicks or whatever have you, then that will also populate your reports and that will also show up. So that question is pretty much a implementation question that's very very specific to your own implementation, because it seems like you're already using eva40 for that. And I would just try to see if that also works with your page view metric, and if there's any like major differences between those, and then ask your implementation team why that is and why or in which case you should which one. And if there's no way for you to use that like built-in, not built-in, but that the custom page name dimension also for page views, what you can also do is you can use Attribution IQ for that. So Attribution IQ is like mostly known for marketing use cases, if you want to like play around with different attribution models and all that fancy stuff. But what you can also do is you can just, for example, in this use case, change your use the card additions metric here to a non-default attribution model, because you can see with the default attribution, like when I'm just using the card additions metric with the page views dimension, there's nothing here, there's nothing reported, because that's just how the page dimension works by default. And if I actually change that and I'm using a non-default attribution model, and I'm saying, please, instead of the normal last touch attribution that's default, just use the last page you've seen in that visit. And in most cases, that will be the site that the user is actually on. Like if people are using multiple tabs and like all those very, very modern use cases of today, if people are jumping between pages, there might be a little bit of of fuzziness around that metric. But in general, you can just use now this metric with your page dimension and see on which pages those cart additions actually happened. So that would be my a little bit more than 2 cents on this topic, but that's what I've read from this question. So anything to add, guys?
That was fantastic.
It was just long, but well.
It's okay. I'm taking notes here. I'm here to learn too. So, all right, that's already happened. So I'm done. Thank you. That was great.
Frederik, there was a comment on the on the chat, like it's EVAR
Oh.
also, so I can read it out. So they
Sure.
noticed that their campaign mean EVAR allocation is set to linear with an expiration of never. So he's wondering in their attribution if they change the expiration to visit instead, as well as the impact of most recent instead of linear. Can you show that here also?
Sure. So like basically whenever you set like any different attribution model, like what should stay the same is like the amount of like total like conversions or card additions in this example. So like the metric itself should stay the same. So whatever it is here, but of course like which which item is attributed to that metric will change in a quite significant way. So if I change it to something like linear for like the visit, that will of course change things quite significantly, but in an interesting way. Like I like to play around with that, and there's some cool like user journey analysis use cases behind that kind of analysis. But yeah, that will have a big impact on your data, and like you might want to like inform the people working with the data, because yeah, suddenly your marketing people might be out of a job otherwise, and it's not a cool news.
Yeah, so that's from Andy. Thanks, Andy, for the comment. So I hope that answers your question.
It's always fun to go back and sanity check these things, and find other places that have data that you can sanity check it with, kind of to make sure it's great to experiment and select those different models and then, but find another way to sanity check it.
True.
I'd echo that you want to analyze before making larger changes like that and understand the use cases and the business questions. But you can learn a lot in just doing that exploration around the attribution models and understanding how your data changes and how the customer journey, you can maybe gather more insights, ideally.
Yeah. And also a cool thing is with attribution IQ in Workspace, we can just change that on the fly and play around with it before you need to make any changes to your EVA setup, because that stuff is permanent, and the stuff here is very, very good to just play around with it. All right, then shall we continue?
Oh, so just to confirm before you continue, Frederik,
Mhm.
can we use attribution IQ against an EVAR?
Sure, like EVAs, props, built-in dimensions, anything you like, it works for all of those.
Yes, thank you. No further chat, so you can proceed with the next question, I think.
Cool. So in this next panel, what I've done here is I've combined two questions because they were kind of similar in regards to email performance in the Adobe Campaign integration. So one question was, what are the best metrics for monitoring email performance that are available in Adobe Analytics? And then the second question that was kind of in the same direction is there a way to integrate Analytics with Adobe Campaign Classic in order to automate pulling data from Campaign into Analytics? So What I've built here is well a report that contains Adobe campaign data. So going by that, even if I've never used that integration myself, I have a very strong suspicion that we can integrate Adobe campaign with Adobe Analytics, because otherwise I would be very surprised whatever this data is here right now. So there's quite a bunch of metrics available. So like all the like metrics that seem relevant to email marketers. I'm again not one of those, but like this looks very relevant to me. So the number of opened and clicked and unsubscribed emails and all those things, that looks pretty much like what you would expect. I don't know if you guys have any experience like integrating with Adobe Campaign in particular, but
No.
that's also one of the things I still have on my bucket list, I think.
For sure.
So for my like specifically for email, right? What I usually do in my in my own like practice, like for specific emails, you would have, let's say you would have the first email, and then you'll have your follow-up emails, and then another follow-up email. So it's ideal for each one to have its own unique QTMs or trackers. So under this, Frederik put here like the marketing channel, right? So specifically for email only, so number 8, so there's a tracking code there. So you'll be able to see like which email campaign really performed well, or like that brought a lot of like clicks or registrations, because you can also track your registration. So it depends. So my short answer would be it depends on what's your goal for your email. So if your email goal is to get registrations or contacts or whatever signups on your website that you can track, so those are the important metrics that you should include.
Neat. Very good. And then also to answer the first question, so in terms of out of the box metrics, so like if you don't have that campaign integration in place, so you're using a non-Adobe email tool, then of course you don't have access to any of those metrics. And what you can do is you can either use, for example, like campaign tracking codes, as was just explained, and you can just attach some tracking codes to your target URL in your email tool. And then you can just see what the people who clicked on any of those campaigns from your email channel, what they've done on your website. So if they if they converted, if they went through the funnel, like how different campaigns affect the marketing funnel in different ways, like basically everything that you would do in like normal campaign analysis can then also be done for your emails. And if you want to go one step further, there's also a way to use data sources to just import any number you like. So if you have Google Analytics data, if you have email marketing data, doesn't matter. You can just import the data through data sources and then also match it with your, for example, tracking codes, with your other parameters and all those things. So that works both in a manual way. You can just manually upload CSV files if that's what you fancy. But you can also build some nifty integrations and just some cool automations on that way. And that's something you can build for yourself. So that's also a word off in terms of what's built in, because that's easy to answer, nothing. So anything that is specific to your tool, you need to do for yourself a little bit. So any further comments or questions? Trying to scan the chat.
There's one comment, but I think it's related to the first question, right? Like, because now it's like the other way around. So now there's Google Ads data going to Adobe. How do we get data such as offline conversions that's in Adobe back to Google Ads?
That's also interesting. So if you're saying you have offline conversions in Adobe Analytics, that makes it even harder. Like if you have some on-site conversions, that makes it a little bit easier, because then you can use some of the integrations. Like you could use something like data feeds to pull that data out of Adobe Analytics, then feed that back into whatever ad platform you have, or whatever DMP, or like what's the new version of that CDP you have running. So that's something you can do, but that's a little bit more advanced. And like my favorite way to do that kind of thing is always to have like some text in the front end, because like I'm always like if the website should tell your Google Ads instance something, that do it in the front end or like in a server-side implementation, but don't go the way through the analytics tool, because that just makes it like more complicated in my experience. So yeah, that's all I can say to that. Any additions?
Yeah, you would add the processing time as well.
Yeah, true.
Yep.
So you
I'm
need to
also
talk this.
thinking, I'm also thinking if you want to retarget pages from Google, you'll be able to get from Adobe what are your top pages with a lot of visits, and then that back to Google Ads. There's a custom there's a custom audience where you can upload, like you want to retarget those who have visited these pages. So if you see that on your Adobe Analytics, these are the highlights or URLs that people are highly engaged, or like you want to further nurture them. So that's one way that you can feed that back to Google Ads. Yeah, I hope Pio, we answered your question. So I think we can go to the next question.
Cool. And I start scrolling down, and that's at least a short question for me to answer because I don't know any of that. But the question is it possible for a project schedule export to include the date in the file name? This is an option in reports, and might I add also in report builder. But my short and simple answer would be no. I've never seen that, and I wouldn't know for that to work. So unless I'm missing something.
Feature request.
Indeed, experience leak. We would surely give a thumbs up on that. Cool.
I'm guessing this is so that data doesn't get overwritten if it's the same file that's arriving every day. The previous one overwrites, or the next one overwrites the previous one if some process breaks along the way.
Yeah, might be what's behind that. And
Yeah.
recommendation would then be to try and include that somewhere within the workspace itself, and like whatever information you need to get out of the file name. Like, for example, if it's the date, then that should be somewhere like in your project, and then you can try to pull it out of the file itself instead of take it from the file name. So yeah, still waiting for FTP delivery for workspace projects, because other tools could do that as well.
Okay, no further follow-up on that. Let's go to the next question.
Cool. Let's scroll on. All right. Next question is about breakdown. So question is, in a freeform table, is it possible to include the same breakdown for each of the primary dimension? In an export file, is it possible to include all levels of the breakdown dimension? So what I've already started doing here is open like an empty freeform table, because there's quite a bunch of ways we can do that. And if I understand your question correctly, we can first take a look at the table builder. So if I just enable that feature, and I'm just now going by Kelsey's recommendation. So if you want to explain this one, feel free to jump in.
Yeah. Table builder can be a great way just to structure the report and how you'd like to see the data. So that can be a way to set things up in advance. The other option is really just to select, I think it's Control Select, and add a drop down to every dimension that you have included. So either of those two routes can be good. Table builder, I think, has a limit of 5 potentially included when you're going through it. Yeah, if you want to do kind of test run. So it's good if it's a smaller data set.
Yeah, so table builder also only has the option to break down 5 items. And here we have the normal options. So that's one way to do that. In table builder, you can just say, all right, I want to have my top 50 items of the page dimension in this case, and then break down the top 5 items by your campaign landing page. You can do that. How can I get out of this again? How do I disable table builder? Do I need to build it once?
Maybe drag in a new freeform.
Yeah, right. So the other option would be to just select multiple ones. So you can go one by one by holding down Control, or if you want to do like the top 10, you can hold down Shift and click here, and then it's going to select everything that's been unselected. So I need to add those again. And now if I drag in the page type, for example, it's going to break down all of those top 10 items by that in a rather simple way. And if I quickly undo that, what you could also do is you can just go into your page type dimension. So for example, do this and then drag all of those up onto this thing, and then it breaks down all of your top 10 items by those 5 that I selected here. And that's a way to like be a little bit more efficient, and can do the same thing in here. So if you just select a few, then hold Control down as you drag, you will also start dragging all of those dimension items. It's not going to make a lot of sense now, but you get the idea. So that's the first part of the question. So like breaking down things can be quite efficient, like if you hold down Control and Shift and just select multiple items. And then the other part of the question, in an export file, is it possible to include all levels of the breakdown dimension? And I didn't really know how to read this, but well, English is not my first language, so my guess would be to have a like different number of breakdowns in your export compared to what you have in an as workspace. And for that, the answer would be like there's no difference between the export and the actual file in workspace. Like that's by design. Like you would be very surprised if your data is different in your export than what you see on your screen if you work with the tool. So those are going to be the same. And if nobody has a different interpretation of that second question,
Frederik, I want to add to the like all levels of the breakdown, like
yeah,
because
sure.
I happens sometimes when you click on the different tool, like the icon, right? When you download, like some instances you might click on maybe just under occurrence or just under the page. So if it's just page that you will download as CSV, you will only download that dimension. So you need to, like for the person who asks, you need to go to the top right of the whole free form, so it will give you all the breakdown.
You're saying this one.
Yes.
Yeah, that's true. So yeah, it's also true. There's a bunch of ways to download data. So you can click here and say download selection, download items. You can click here and say download as CSV. And you can click here and say also for the whole project download as CSV. And depending which way you go, your data might be different. Can you also do that on the panel level? No, there's no option in there. So depending on where you click, it's also going to be that. And so if by export you mean the like scheduling and downloading here, then it's the exact same thing you see here. And yeah, depending on where you click in the actual panel, then it's going to be relative to that.
Yes. Is there no? You have other additional here, the rest of the champions.
Nothing
great.
to add.
There are many different ways to approach this one.
Before we move on to the next question, I think we can go like there's chat box, like there's two versions of a website, so really exclusive of the in terms of the user base. So the main question is that aside from attributing the difference to audience behavior, like does Adobe Analytics offer a good way to compare implementations? So the example was there's a and B website, and they see a very big difference in conversion metrics, like around 20%. And so they're wondering like the segment comparison and had some success in spotting differences, but curious if you can recommend additional options.
I'm not going to go first on this one because I'm talking way too much already.
Yeah, where to begin with that one? I mean, there's so many places maybe to cut in on that, to start looking at the implementation. to look at the reporting. You know, maybe you want to look kind of at a broad or unfiltered data to find the differences and kind of go very intentionally to look at every step of the way.
Thanks, Mitchell.
And the baseline audit.
Oh, sorry. Oh, go, Kelsey.
And I was just going to add to the previous comment that a baseline audit could be a great place to get started if that hasn't already happened. Just starting at the foundational pieces of what you're capturing and where, and understanding that a little bit further. That's always a great knowledge set to have.
Yeah. So, like one thing to always be aware of in like any kind of A/B test that you're going to run on a website is you're going to have people who manage to circumvent like whatever like measure you put in place to keep them in their experience. So you will always have some people that move from one experience to another one, either because they want to or because it's an error. So actually doing a segment overlap in Adobe Analytics could be quite helpful. So you can just drag that in somewhere. And then it's the Venn diagram, right? So why do I build my table so long? So what you could try is use a Venn diagram with just the two segments, like for your experience, use it with the visitors metric. So you can then just see, whoops, why did it do that? Well, so with the visitors metric is what I wanted to say originally. And then you can just see if people are going from one experience to another one. And that might have an impact on your results. And like if the impact of your A/B test is too big to be trustworthy, and if you're seeing like wild conversion numbers from one experience compared to the other one, like that's a way to kind of nail that and see if people are actually moving from one experience to another one, and also just break down the segment of users from one experience by page, for example, or by product, or like we don't know what you're like A/B testing, so don't know if you're like A/B testing something like a product copy or like your UX funnel or something else. So depending on that, you can then see if people are actually moving from one experience to another one, because like the web's always a like kind of dirty place. So there's always going to be people who use multiple devices, multiple browsers, or just delete their cookies. So yeah, there might also be other reasons for that.
Yes. Thanks, Frederik. I was supposed to read a question specifically for Mitchell, but I saw Mitchell, you already replied to it. So we can go to the next
couldn't
question.
resist.
You're having all the fun. Like for the people on the recording, like what is it about?
Oh, right. That's right. Because those chats won't be recorded, will they?
Okay, I can read it. So
Yes.
like for Mitchell, is there a way to install Adobe Analytics inside a WordPress instance and also inside the main website of Jason, where Adobe Analytics is installed, is Dreamweaver, but he wants to add it to their WordPress blog and sales funnels. So Mitchell, your answer?
Yeah, definitely you'd want to research any plugins that might be available, kind of on the broader plugin market for Adobe Analytics into WordPress, or you may need to write your own, or research how to implement Adobe Analytics or a tag container directly into WordPress. It's a very broad question. It would need some research. I don't think there's any quick free lunch on it. You're going to have to dig in and find a way to do that implementation to make sure that you get the correct data back.
Thanks, Mitchell. So I saw another question also regarding automation. I think we have it in our question beforehand. So I think we can proceed to the next question, and this would be answered also.
Okay. Cool. Then I start scrolling down again. So there is a question that is using page name v1. So we again have a custom page name dimension on our hands here. as the dimension, how do you create a calculated metric to determine the completion percentage for application starts versus application complete? So this sounds like a very, very specific use case already, like somebody might be working on a very concrete problem there. And like again, I'm talking way too much anyway. So guys, do you want to go through that and share your thoughts first?
Kelsey?
I think that you're on a great view here, Frederik, in thinking about the different options you can use. So followed is certainly a way that you can approach this in terms of getting that lens, and then creating a calculated metric from that. I like this visually. I think it can be really, really helpful to have this type of representation in reports, even in addition to calculated metrics. The other thing is just using a panel. That can be a simple way to right click and create calculated metrics as well.
Sure.
So
Good addition. We're going to show that as well. Yeah. Cool. And I can just scroll some of the stuff that I've done here. So again, this is not our implementation, so things are a little bit different to how we would do them ourselves. So for example, in this like very simple fallout, I just added the like the launch page of an app, like presumably, like we don't know what it's from, but like that's what I've gathered from the name of that page, and then also added the product details page. So now we can see that 9.9% of people actually go like this way through that funnel, and that's super helpful because we have that number now already. But if we want to show that number in a different place, what we can just do here is we can right click this item here and say trend touch point %. And what that will give us, I've prepared that as well, is like very unsurprisingly, it will give us a very nice trend graph of that exact touch point. So here we now have this like on average like 9.9%, like should be roughly the same number here. And here we can actually see this graph now. Now, because Adobe Analytics always needs to have a freeform table behind any line visualization, what we can now do is we can just say, please show me the data source of this graph. And here we have it. And this is actually the calculated metric that Adobe Analytics has built for us behind the scenes. And you can also see that the number is the same up here. So like with the rounding and all that in place, you can see it's actually the same number. And this metric we can now just drag into any other panel. We can work with it, we can save it, we can rename it, and we don't need to build it ourselves if we don't want to. So that's actually a way for like Adobe Analytics to build that metric right for us, and we can just use that. And then of course showing also the other tip. So if we, for example, if we have online orders and cart editions, and we want to create a metric like out of those two, like what we need to say in terms of like caution, like for the fallout visualization, like depending on what we set here, it's always going to be based on the full visit or the visitor. But like depending on what you want to do, that might not be what you're after, because you might want to like divide the number of online orders by the number of cart editions, for example. So in that very simple example, we just highlight both, right click, create metric from selection, and say divide. Like my personal preference is always to open it in the calculate metric builder first, because then we can say things like I want this to be a percentage and I want to have 2 decimal places and all those nice kind of things, and then we can just put that into our table. Click out of all those again, and then we have a nice, why not edit twice, right? And then we have a nice conversion metric built out of those. What this also can do is, for example, because we were asking for a concrete page name, what we could think of for a certain page, where my page views. So let's say that a step in your funnel is defined by, well, a page being open, and there's no dedicated event for that. So let's say we want people to go from the home page to category 5 or something. So yeah, we have data for both. If we put it in the right order, then what we can do is we need to rearrange this a little bit. Yeah. It's when you want to speak and show at the same time. Because if I'm not mistaken, if I now create the calculator metric like this, it should still, it will retain the filters that we've set. So this is also a very quick way to build this out of filtered metrics. So in this case, we could divide our number of category 5 page views by the number of home page views in a rather simple way, and we don't need to like build those segments ourselves or like include this in the calculator metric builder. We can just build our table, click create calculator metric from selection, and then we're good to go. So yeah, there's quite a bunch of ways to achieve that, and I don't know if there's anything to add or any questions in chat.
Mitchell, you have anything to add? If not, I will read another question from the chat.
Nothing to add on that one, except that it's amazing to watch you work.
I'm not even working. I'm just having fun with Workspace.
That's
But yeah,
the best part. That's the best part. It's like orchestra conducting. Fantastic.
Thank you.
Yes, I definitely agree. And I also want to recognize one of our fellow Adobe Analytics champion who's very active in answering questions on the chat, Jason. Thank you, Jason. Okay, another question. How to see top actions that happen in a specific screen if we cannot cross track state with track action? Fernando would like to know every track action that happened on each page or screen of the app. Can Adobe recognize unique visitors across platforms if user ID, for example?
Okay.
The background. Do you need more info? So the background is that in Europe, they have issues with GDPR. So if they implement user ID with unique database user ID, it will be visible with data layer. And even the fact that this ID will be available on Adobe dashboard might be an issue. Is there a recommended best practice for this case? And the data office team might not approve the implementation otherwise.
So yeah, as a fellow European, I feel your pain. And it's very hard to give any recommendation on that because there's always the technical challenge, then there's the legal challenge, and then there's the interpretation of your legal team of both of those things. So it's very hard for us, I would say, to give any kind of recommendation because depending on like if you're working for a bank or for an insurance company or for a healthcare company, then this answer would be very different from if you're working for an online retailer. So depending on what you can do, like it's just very hard, like very important to work together with your legal team in terms of like translating all those technical terms into like actual like real world like scenarios and like pointing out what it all means to them because it's all I can say from like the European perspective because like the technical things once you've got the legal stuff figured out is like relatively simple and relatively straightforward because then you know what you can work with, but it's always very hard to just like figure out the technical solution and then going back to a legal team, like getting it disapproved and then trying to figure out a workaround and all those things. So
there's a comment from Jason regarding that also, like if for the question, like if you want to see the top actions on a specific screen, Jason recommends firing a track action on all of the actions along with an event on EVAR that contains the screen name where the action occurred.
Yeah, that's also what we've covered in the scrolling is getting a little bit sluggish. Sorry for that. That's also what we've covered basically with what we explained before. So like when you want to see like a certain like action that happened on a certain page, like you can either use a custom page name that you just set with like every page view, every link click, every like whatever interaction you might have, and then you always have that in relation like to your screen. Like in a mobile app, I always pretend that my screens are pages because otherwise it's going to get really fuzzy. So always calling them pages anyways. And what you can then also do is, as we've shown here, use attribution IQ, because what's also pretty cool is that, again, not our implementation here. So let me find something. Do we have something like a button name or link name? Type right. Custom link, does that work? Let's see. So yeah, kind of. So what you can see is I'm like, according to Adobe, I'm doing something illegal here right now. So I'm breaking down like a page by custom link, and like according to Adobe's own logic, that should not work. But what you can do is you can just also on a breakdown level, just edit the attribution model and say, all right, I know that I cannot track those together, but what I can just do is I can break down my page by my like link name, button name, like whatever interaction you might have and you want to analyze, and then just change that attribution model just for the breakdown to something else. And that will then like show all your data like as you expected, and that should work for most use cases. So you can definitely try that workaround.
Thanks, Frederik. So regarding privacy, since we've talked about it, not legal also. So there's another question
Shouldn't have
like,
started.
have you figured out a way to combat the iOS privacy issue of cookie expiration of 7 days? Is it because it's overcounting their unique visitor IDs?
Yep, that's what happens. So like what you like, let's say in like a whole like beehive to like run into, not safe, but like in the current state, what you can do is try to bring all of your data collection and like cookie setting servers behind your first party domain and not having it CNAMEd, because that even today gives some challenges. So one way to solve that is by putting your whole like whatever Adobe server you have behind your corporate proxy or your CDN or something. So if your website is using something like Akamai for like web proxying and like firewalling and all that stuff, then there's ways to configure both Adobe Analytics and also the like Experience Cloud ID service to run behind that proxy, and that will then look like to your browser like your website is making a like completely legitimate first party request. And like for the browser, there's no way to like identify that like request is actually going to Adobe or like a tracking system, because it looks genuine. So that's something that works, and like I have some like Twitter threads like lying around somewhere where I've like played around with that and actually worked. And that you can do, and you want to bring like as much of your data collection like behind your own servers. And then, of course, there's the route of going like Web SDK and using like server-side tracking through the Web SDK, because it's like built in that like kind of environment, and there's ways to do it with that one. But yeah, even if you have like normal Adobe Analytics, then there's ways to do that with your corporate CDN or proxy. Don't know if there's any other experiences, but that worked for me at least once.
Do you still use that ongoing?
Yes.
That tactic?
Yeah, and it still works. Like I've checked it a few months back, and yeah, seems to be working.
And is there a have you seen a document or like a kind of a document that explains like the same way you do first party cookies with the CNAME to do this technique?
Well, like that way involves like abusing a lot of Adobe's internal configuration variables in the front end. So I've never seen a complete guide from Adobe.
Yeah.
But I think I've written about that on my own blog. So if you want to go to fullstackanalyst.io and search for like first party or something like that, I assume. Don't know my own blog, but there might be something about that on there. Let me see if I can find that.
We could talk for days about this topic because it's really, yeah, it's kind of huge. Nobody wants to talk about it is the problem. And there's for various reasons.
True. Do that. So like shameless self plug here. But on this blog, fullstackanalyst.io, there's a post here on how to do like first party hosting with Adobe Analytics, and like you can bring like launch completely on your own servers with self-hosting and all of that stuff. But what you can do is you can configure your Experience Cloud ID service to run like behind a proxy, and this is like how you can configure one proxy to do that, and like how to do that in launch then as well. So there's variables like the audience manager server and the audience manager server secure and all those. And if you set all those correctly to your own servers and you proxy all the requests to Adobe, then for the browser and for the user, there's no way to figure out that this is actually not your own company, but Adobe behind it. And then they also can't block that, and your cookies live quite long for that. So yeah, you can see all first party here. Don't know if I have a screenshot, but yeah, that will then save your cookies and let them live longer than 7 days.
Do you think this same tactic can be used on Target?
Well, I haven't tried it yet. I don't know if Target has a way to like set the destination server in the same way. Like, worth a try, I would say. Haven't tried it myself. With Web SDK, it might be easier because there's only one endpoint. So,
Thanks for
thank
sharing,
you for the
Frederik.
question.
Thank
Next
you.
question, I can read the next question for you. Okay, we'll proceed with the next question. Can you help me scroll down in this workspace? So
Oh, sorry, in this workspace. Yes, so
to the next question.
yes, next question here is about goal metrics, because somebody asked, I have managed to build out goal metrics for 2023, such as web visits and purchases. I've used the day count calculator metric to show pacing, but what are some recommended visualizations to showcase pacing to goals? And one way to do that is using the bullet visualization. I don't find that personally very appealing, and it's not very flexible. Like what you can configure here is you can say you want to have those 3 goals, and then it will show the progress towards that goal, and that is one way to do it. Gets very, very tedious if you have more than one goal for a year. So if there's like a goal per month or something, then it can get a little bit messy with this one. And just again, something that I've done on the blog is you can use something like the linearity indicator, which is like a visualization that shows per month how you're pacing towards the goal, and then predicts where you're going to end up if the performance continues and all that stuff. You can find that on the blog, and also, yeah, I did do that. So last year in the Analytics Rockstar session at Summit, I've actually shared a video on how to build that kind of thing. So if you want to hear me talk about that, you can also do that, or listen to the 2 way smarter people or 3 way smarter people, how they like to visualize this kind of thing. That's your cue.
I like what you shared. I might add the summary number or summary change. Those can be nice little snapshots with an analysis workspace report too, depending upon it's not robust, but it can be visually a good indicator of progress if it's more of an executive level of report. But I think these are also great examples too. So a few different ways you can approach.
Yeah. Works especially great with calculated metrics. So like the summary change or summary numbers. That's a very good suggestion.
Mitchell, you have addition? If not, we'll proceed with the next question since we have
go right
7
ahead.
minutes left.
Yeah.
So many questions, so little time. Yeah. So another question then is, how long does it take someone to add an item to cart, view cart, complete the checkout process, and then complete the order? And what you can do, that's a built-in dimension in Adobe Analytics. You can use the time prior to event dimension. And I've used that with like a bunch of different metrics already here. So that dimension will show you how far into a visit a certain event has happened. And then of course that works with a bunch of assumptions. So it just starts measuring at the beginning of your visit. It doesn't take into account maybe there's 5 minutes of product exploration before that, and then you just start your funnel and you actually want to have it in a different way. So that's something it doesn't take into account. So it always starts counting at the beginning of your visit. But it works really nicely for some high level overview, and it's not very granular as well, but for something like this, it works quite nicely to say, all right, where does my cart addition happen, and how long does it take for the checkout and your online orders, and you get a nice distribution for that. So in terms of having something out of the box that just works, and it you don't need to enable anything, you don't need to implement anything. So for that reason, it's quite nice because it's just there for every implementation. And yeah, if you want to have something that's more specific to your use case and you have restrictions there, and people can restart their checkout process and all those different complexities, then that makes it more complex, of course, and then you need to implement something yourself or use like sequential segments that say like this within like 1 minute or like 2 minutes. Like that's also something you can do, but that's a little bit more involved. So yeah.
Yeah, I think also this one will give you an idea when to show your pop-ups if you have any pop-ups as a reminder. Yeah, I think that that also answers another question on the chat on the live chat. So it's good. We can proceed to the next question. Is it
All
our
right.
last? I think it's our last question.
Yes, last question from the previously submitted ones. So this one is about alerts, and it says, hi, about alerts. So yeah, is there a way to set up an alert where normally is above or below expected or changes by percent that only compares against the same day of week for daily alerts or same hour of day for hourly alerts? So the way that anomaly detection works, and alerts are based on anomaly detection in Adobe Analytics, it's trying to model like whatever is normal for your page. And there's actually a full like page on the documentation about the statistical methods that are used for anomaly detection. And you can see for like daily anomaly detection, there's a bunch of methods that Adobe Analytics is using already. So it's already taking in account like several like bank holidays. It's already taking account like different like types of seasonalities there. So it's already trying to give you a pretty good like approximation of that. And unfortunately, today there's no way to build a alert that is like fully fully dynamic to the day of week, because you don't have like that rolling comparison in there. But you could use segments that filter for like specific things, and then have like a Monday alert and Tuesday alert and all those different things. But that gets a little bit hard to manage like over time. So yeah. Like if you want to use this feature and just say like using anomaly detection already here, and then I would just go like all in and say, all right, Adobe, figure out for me when that is like an anomaly or not. But yeah, like if you want to use a calculate metric instead, you can also just build that, and it's an alternative route. Going to stop talking.
Mitchell or Kelsey, like with the remaining 3 minutes, you have other things to add on to it? There was a question like the time before event, like the time prior to event, it's built in Adobe Analytics, right? Correct?
Sure.
Mhm.
So it's built
Works
in.
everywhere.
Yes.
Websites, apps, works for everything.
So for those who joined a bit late, like the recording of this is on the link to the recording is in the chat. You can also find this in the YouTube channel of Adobe Analytics Office Hours. So for those that we haven't answered some of the questions, we'll try to answer it next time, or like we can send a follow-up, or like some of the questions maybe in the Adobe Analytics community. But yes, there's just one question from Jason on like their marketing audiences and Google Ads. So you're asking specifically to the new GA4 implementation. So I can't answer you right now, but anyone in the team can answer. Like if you have idea, like the new GA4 rollout affects this. So similar audiences disappear in May 2023, and getting GA4 audiences set up correctly in Google Ads is time sensitive. I have this sorted out in GA4, but have not tackled this from Adobe Analytics. Where do I go to leverage this rich data and pass it over to Google Ads? Any ideas?
Data feeds and API to get the data, to move the data from Adobe. That's just like a beginning hint. There's more to it.
Yes. Thank you,
Really
Mitchell.
depends on the use case.
Some assembly
really
required.
Depends on what you need.
Yeah.
DMP also, like someone asked, like is DMP possible?
DMP, CDP, all good approaches. It depends very much on the use case. Yeah.
Okay, I think that's all we have for this office hour. So thank you everyone for joining, and thank you for our Adobe Analytics Champion. So don't forget to go to the YouTube channel of Adobe Analytics Office Hours.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you all, and don't forget.
When in doubt, just simply right click.
Sorry. Do it.
Well said.
Thank you. This went by really quickly.
Yes, it did. Thank you. See you next time.
What do we do now?